The kudzu vine can grow as much as a foot per day during the long, hot summer in the deep south. Some people say if you listen hard enough, you can hear it grow. It's estimated that over 7 million acres of the South are covered with these vines. They grow better here than almost anywhere else in the world, so kudzu has come to represent the South in literature, art, and popular culture. The story of this plant's invasion and how Southerners have reacted to it is truly amazing.
Kudzu, Pereira lobata. The scientific name is a large-leaf, deep-rooted, perennial legume. It belongs to the same family as our black-eyed peas that we eat on the 1st of January. Most of the time, you will find this plant southward from Kentucky to the Gulf and from Texas eastward to the Atlantic.
There's so much kudzu in the South, you might think it's been growing here since the beginning of time. It just seems to be everywhere. But kudzu is not native to the Southeast. Botanists call it an invasive alien because it was imported to the United States. It was very popular during its early years here, but now many Southerners consider it a nuisance. You might say kudzu's history is a journey up and down the power pole. The 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exposition celebrated the 100th birthday of American independence. Countries from around the world assembled exhibits to showcase their culture. The Japanese government constructed a beautiful garden containing plants that were new to the United States. It's still here today. This Philadelphia garden is where kudzu was planted for the first time in the Americas. The large leaves and sweet-smelling blooms captured the imagination of American gardeners who saw its potential for ornamental purposes. As years passed, the kudzu vine, which quickly produces shady retreats from the sun, came to be known as the front porch vine and was sold by nurseries to anxious customers. Chipley, Florida was home to the Glen Arden Nursery run by Charles and Lily Please. They started selling the front porch vine in 1902 and made an amazing discovery that changed their lives. They discovered that animals go after kudzu like candy. Charles and Lily spent the rest of their lives promoting kudzu for animal grazing and hay. Glen Arden Nursery sold kudzu through the mail, but some of their neighbors remained skeptical.
One time when we had a farmer pull up there and he's wondering what that weed was out there in the fields, and Mr. Please went out and pulled up a beggar weed. The mules like that. And then he put up a handful of kudzu. And he got up there and took the beggar weed, put up there in front of the mule's nose, and he just twisted his head. He wasn't even fool with it. But when we stuck the kudzu up there, the mule just grabbed it,
Since kudzu does not always grow well from seed, Mr. Please sold kudzu root crowns through the mail. He even invented a special plow to dig up the roots.
Mr. Please, with the help of a blacksmith, or instructed the blacksmith, made a plow to harvest the kudzu plants, which is a sweep with horizontal blades on it and a vertical blade in the center where he could run under the kudzu plants and cut the vertical roots and also cut any horizontal root as you made a pass through the soil.
A historical marker in Chipley praises the work of Charles and Lily Please. Through their work, kudzu became widely known by farmers as a pasture crop and a fast-growing solution to soil erosion. The South was washing away. Perpetual cotton production year after year wore out the soil and old-fashioned farm practices were not geared toward preserving precious topsoil. In 1935, President Franklin D. Roosevelt created the Soil Conservation Service to teach farmers new methods. The government advocated using kudzu for erosion control. 93-year-old Claude B. Kahn remembers.
That was about the best thing we knew to put there.
With thousands of young men unemployed during the Depression, President Roosevelt created a program to put them to work on conservation projects. The Civilian Conservation Corps built dams and bridges, constructed state park facilities across the nation, and planted kudzu to control erosion. Mr. Kahn supervised 200 workers.
Steep land, so forth. We take these boys, plant the kudzu crowns for them.
By the late 1930s, kudzu was widely used, but there were still some people who weren't convinced it was right for them. The stage was set for a man who promoted kudzu with evangelistic zeal. Covington, Georgia, just east of Atlanta, was the home of kudzu's greatest advocate, Channing Cope. If Covington looks familiar to you, you may have seen it on the TV series In the Heat of the Night, which was filmed here. Channing Cope wrote for the Atlanta Constitution newspaper and did a daily radio program from his front porch in Covington that was broadcast on WSB in Atlanta.
If it hadn't been for kudzu, the miracle vine, all my land would have washed away. They used to say cotton is king in the South, but I say cotton isn't king anymore. Kudzu is king.
He was just a genuine Southern gentleman. He fit that role very well. I think everybody in the community respected him, looked up to him. He was a corporate attorney, I believe, for one of the utility firms in Atlanta. And I believe he was sort of on a crusade as far as kudzu, because when he came down here, he could see the effects of soil erosion.
And that was his main subject on his program, was stop the erosion, clear up the rivers and the creeks, and by putting out kudzu, and he told how to put it out, you know, how to plant it, and he told them where to buy it, and it would come in little crates like, and kind of like a little grapevine, you know. He told them how to set it out, and I tell you, it wasn't long until this place was green everywhere.
Channing Cope founded the Kudzu Club of America and traveled across the country speaking to local chapters. He created kudzu excitement that lasted through the 1940s. There were kudzu festivals and kudzu queen pageants, but by the 1950s, public opinion began to turn against Cope and his miracle vine. He was disappointed when the government stopped recommending kudzu for erosion control in 1953. In 1962, Channing Cope was laid to rest in an unmarked Atlanta grave. The front porch from which he broadcast his radio program has fallen in now, but his legacy will live for years to come. In 1972, kudzu was officially declared to be a weed by the United States Department of Agriculture. Nowadays, you don't hear many people talking about planting kudzu. They might get shot if they did. You see, if you don't stop kudzu, it'll grow over everything in its path. Just look at this poor fellow trying to clear off that sign. 2 months later, he's got to do it all over again. You can see why many Southerners think of controlling kudzu as an impossible dream. Wildflower enthusiast Mary Burkes is concerned about kudzu as she watches it take over more of the South each year.
We tried to use it, but it's just outsmarted us, and it evidently finds this warm, moist southeastern climate even better than the climate where it came from. It does better here, and it's just overwhelming everything. If you want to have a house full of kudzu, just wait, and if we keep on like this, you can just have your house covered with kudzu and all the trees in your yard. Kudzus don't have ordinary roots, and that's one reason it's so hard to kill. That thing, eventually, if it's a big kudzu plant, can have a root 7 feet long and weighing 440 pounds. And that's like attacking the thing from the dark lagoon or something. This is a horrendous plant.
I'm putting this down along this vine where it has set down root.
Like many Southerners, J.B. Dollar has been fighting kudzu on his land for years.
The vine goes on out that way, but I believe that's where it came from, really. I sprayed this area with herbicide about 10 years ago, maybe, and got most of it. And I've been spot treating it every year since then, up to about 2 years ago. I thought I had it whipped, and I quit. And come to find out this spring, I found several areas where we still had kudzu, and I hadn't killed it. Probably talking about maybe from $100 to $200 an acre to completely get rid of it. I don't know. I haven't completely gotten rid of any yet, so I can't really say.
They continually treat every year, several times. People are out there tackling it with like using pea shooters against the invading hordes. One of the most important stories to tell about kudzu is that we can and have the means to control it, to eradicate it on a certain site.
Utility companies and foresters depend on Dr. Miller's advice. For 18 years now, he's studied methods used to control kudzu. He started out by testing herbicides recommended for kudzu on forested land and was surprised by what he found.
One actually made it grow better. At least 3 had essentially no effect on kudzu. And it actually came down to only 3 were effective, but in essence only 1 was cost effective. The most effective herbicide we have on the market for kudzu is selective for leguminous plants. We know now that the roots of kudzu will lie dormant under the ground for many years, probably from 3 to 10 years. So this is a pretty miraculous plant that can be injured severely, lay underneath the ground without growing a vine out of it, and then finally recover to a point where it wants to send up a vine and start re-invading the location. So after you do a 4-year program of control, requires a constant surveillance for up to 10 years to find out if any plants have started to reestablish. The main idea in kudzu control is persistence. It does no good just to treat one time and, as most folks know that have done this, and walk away from it because it will come back. So it takes several years of application or control techniques being applied over and over again.
Control methods vary from one location to another. Dr. Miller recommends you check with your county extension service office before beginning a personal battle with kudzu. Constant grazing by any animal will kill kudzu over a period of years.
A team of scientists at Tuskegee University, comprising many disciplines, animal science, economics, and the plant sciences, wanted to take a look at how best to manage kudzu on forested areas. One of the best animals that we thought that we could use was Angora goats that would provide both hair and possibly meat to the region. We found that if we allow Angora goats to intensively graze kudzu over at least a 2 growing season, that we are able to manage that kudzu.
Since Angora goats produce milk and wool products, they provide a way to make a profit from kudzu-covered forest land that otherwise might be considered useless. This research is an example of people taking a fresh look at kudzu and finding ways to use it. Maybe Charles and Lily Pleas were right after all. Maybe it is a miracle vine like Channing Cope said. Have we just allowed a valuable resource to go to waste? Can't we find some way to use this stuff? After all, it's here, it's free, so why not? These colorful collages were made from kudzu paper by Nancy Baskett of Union, South Carolina. She makes the paper from kudzu leaves, which she gathers and ferments into pulp.
I have 10 acres of land, and along one side of the acreage, the kudzu grows prolifically, so out of self-preservation I have to use what's on that side so it doesn't cover the rest of the 10 acres.
After adding color to the pulp, she lifts it onto a screen to form a flat sheet which dries into paper. Many of Nancy Baskett's collages reflect her Native American heritage. Her work has been featured by galleries across the Southeast. These egg baskets were made from kudzu vines by Ruth Duncan of Greenville, Alabama. You can see why folks call her the Queen of Kudzu.
Kudzu's always been kind of a joke, you know, for the South, because people just think there's no use for it. And when they find out that you can make a beautiful basket out of it, they're amazed. They say, well, thank goodness, you know, there is some use for it. There's plenty of it. But I don't pull the kudzu that's growing on the ground now with the roots in it. I like to get the kind that goes up in the trees, up the telephone posts and up in the top of the trees. So that's a job to pull down. But kudzu, it's kind of like rubber. You work with it within a week after you pull it. After then it gets hard and dry, but it's a real neat vine to work with.
Rosa Thomas, creator of this kudzu coffee pot, found kudzu easier to get than the split oak from which she learned to make baskets.
Well, he was an older man making them out of split oak, and I went to want to make some, so he said, you can't find no oak, so I told him, well, I ain't got to make them out of oak, I'll make them out of other, you know, things I can find, so. Well, I first started buying stuff, making them, and then that was expensive, so then I went to making them out of vine.
Regina Hines of Ball Ground, Georgia, makes kudzu creations with a different twist. She appears at Southeastern craft shows and kudzu festivals.
Kudzu is the most flexible of all of the vines. It's the only one that can be tied into knots and formed into curls without breaking. Its flexibility gives it so much versatility. It can be used for many different applications. It takes a while to curl them, but it's a kind of a crazy look that I think is appealing. I like it anyway. It started in Lineville, Alabama, where my sister-in-law retired to a farm which she called the Kudzu for obvious reasons, and moaned and groaned and fussed and complained, and I got tired of hearing it. So I thought something needed to be done about it, and this is what has evolved.
The works of many kudzu artisans have been assembled into a traveling exhibit by Diane Hoots of Warner Robins, Georgia, author of 101 Uses of Kudzu.
All of us that do kudzu things love to tell about it because it's fun.
Diane Hoots has turned what is commonly called the vine that ate the South into the vine the South is eating.
The flower smells like grapes, and the jelly tastes more like grape apple than anything else. Everybody loves the jelly because it's such a mild, fruity, neat taste, but it tastes like kudzu flowers. And the syrup is cane syrup with a wildflower taste because it's a different process. But the jelly is fun to make. You pick all the little blossoms and you put it in a big pot, pour boiling water over it, let it seep like tea, and you strain out all the liquid and use that juice like you would grape juice and you make jelly. It's really easy. You just have to fight the bees and things for the flowers and the ants because they love the flowers.
Welcome to the Kudzu Cow Farm in Rutherfordton, North Carolina. Over the last 30 years, Henry and Edith Edwards have tried many uses for kudzu and have become widely known advocates for the lowly vine.
Kudzu helped us on the farm when we had dairy cattle, kept us from going broke, so to speak, because several summers we had droughts and everything else was brown, but kudzu was green, so we knew it had full value to it. We call kudzu green gold.
Many farmers get frustrated trying to harvest kudzu hay because their equipment gets tangled in the vines. Henry Edwards has found that the height settings for cutting and baling machinery hold the secret.
The way to handle kudzu is to cut it low and bale it high. So many farmers don't do that, and especially if the baler wheel would drop down in a little depression and the header would pick up these vines haven't been cut, it chokes you up and the man goes back to the barn. He just gets out of heart. It's as good as alfalfa, sometimes better. We've had it tested at NC State at 22% protein. And alfalfa runs along in that, so it's excellent to feed, and the cattle like it better than anything we've ever fed. And they'll just about tear a fence down to get to it. It's hard to keep a fence between cattle and kudzu.
But the Edwards animals have competition when it comes to eating kudzu. Edith Edwards is making deep-fried kudzu leaves like she did for visitors to the Knoxville, Tennessee World's Fair in the early 1980s. She found this recipe and many others in the Book of Kudzu, a culinary and healing guide by William Shirtleff and Akiko Ayagi. In its native lands, kudzu has been a respected ingredient in foods and herbal medicines for 2,000 years. But Southerners have only been experimenting with the plant since the early 20th century.
Well, it was a long time ago, and this was during the Depression when the South was washing away by erosion. And so they decided to plant kudzu to stop the erosion. And we found out later on that maybe kudzu had done for the South what Sherman never could have done, which was to completely conquer the South. And then came kudzu tea.
Oxford Stroud of Auburn, Alabama is mixing up another batch of his kudzu tea.
Mix it with honey, and then with a little touch of mint. It's kind of like a poor man's or redneck's mint julep with no alcohol, of course.
Now retired from teaching, Oxford Stroud entertained many of his classes at Auburn University with kudzu tea. When he came up with his recipe in the 1930s, he didn't know that tea made from kudzu leaves or roots had been common in China and Japan for centuries. Ground kudzu root is used in many Oriental foods and has medicinal value which researchers at Harvard Medical School have been testing. They have found that kudzu reduces the desire for alcohol in rodents with drinking problems, and they hope it may someday prove helpful to humans as well. Who knows what the future may bring as the amazing story of kudzu continues to unfold?
Well, I was driving riding through the south one day, I'm merrily going along my way, when I noticed a vine growing in the trees with purple flowers and big green leaves. So I stopped to ask, what could this be that's growing all up in the trees and on the ground and everywhere? In fact, it seems to grow in the air. I was told Kudzu was the name of this vine. It's a plant of its own, it's one of a kind. I was told it grows a foot a day. It's all through the south and it's here to stay. Oh, Kudzu, Kudzu, what are you? You're growing all around my shoe, and if I stand too long and stare, I'll find you growing in my hair.
Each year I have a number of people who contact me regarding kudzu, and about half of them want to grow it, the other half want to kill it. So we seem to have a little bit of difference of opinion among the general population as to what we should do with kudzu these days.